This is Tuesdays with Ted. That's me. And I'm sharing with you everything that I know in hopes that you can elevate your life. Hey guys, Ted again. It's Tuesday and it's 3 p.m. Pacific time, 6 p.m. Eastern, which means it's time for Tuesdays with Ted. And that's where I share with you everything I've learned that helps me build what I feel like is a great life. So nutrition, we talk about nutrition, we talk about yoga, we talk about fitness and wellness. And today we're talking about mindset and what ultimately the two sort of mindsets that sort of you can break it all down into is either a fixed mindset, which means you're kind of stuck in your life and you're not really moving along, versus a growth mindset. Stand by. It's playing. I don't know whose it is. So fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. So as I continue to talk, feel free to throw out some questions, but we're going to talk about pretty much 4 or 5 different ways you can tell whether you have a growth mindset or a fixed mindset. So I learned all this stuff from a woman named Carol Dweck, who is a PhD researcher, and I think she's at Stanford, but she's very famous writing a book back in 2006 called Mindset, of all things, The New Psychology of Success. But interestingly enough, for me, I firmly believe that our mindset is one of the most important things that you really have that you can control. So when you start thinking about things, that's really, if you think about it, your common mindset is what's actually, I would say, it feeds your whole kind of life and your whole world there, right? So the first thing to look at, whether or not you have a fixed mindset or a growth mindset, is challenges. So when you look at a challenge, are you the kind of person to take on a challenge immediately? Or are you the kind of person who avoids challenges? Do you embrace them or do you avoid them? So for me, it really depends. I try to embrace the challenge when it comes, although sometimes I'm like, I just can't deal with it. I just want to sort of move on. But I think yoga specifically, when I talk about yoga, I think what happens for me is that I go into a challenge. And when you go into a specific pose in yoga, for instance, in a way, you're setting up a safe way to challenge yourself. And then there's always a learning, there's always a benefit to that particular challenge. So for instance, if you're in, Warrior 2 and your shoulders are relaxed and you're breathing and the pose is getting more and more intense, or whatever you're doing, lifting weights, running, whatever it is that you're doing, the more that you actually do it for a longer period of time, it gets more intense and more intense and more intense. And the yoga practice specifically, sometimes an exercise, but more so for sure, the yoga practice teaches you how to embrace that challenge, how to calm down in the midst of a challenge, and ultimately prepare yourself for these other challenges that are going to happen in life, because life throws us the unexpected. All the time things happen to us, and good and bad, both good and bad. And sometimes it's a little bit tricky to deal with these unexpected things that happen. So to have a growth mindset is where you embrace the challenge. And that's what I would recommend. If you have a fixed mindset and you avoid the challenges, just see what it's like. Take a little time, see what it's like, and actually go into your challenge and see what you can learn from the challenge. I mean, just like your body is sore from working out, that's your body telling you, hey, there's some growth, right? The muscles are now regenerating. So there's actually some growth in your challenge. So, and there's some benefit in the challenge as well. So our second one is obstacles, right? So it's similar to a challenge, but an obstacle is something, I guess, that you could say is kind of fixed, that's sitting there. And when you come up against an obstacle, Do you assess it and do you sort of go over it, or do you again avoid it? Do you feel like it's, you just kind of give up easy and you're not really putting the work in that actually is needed for to overcome that obstacle, right? So nowadays, obstacle course racing is a really big deal, Spartan races and all these kinds of things. So it's funny enough, they've set up a whole bunch of obstacles for you to do, whether it's Tough Mudder or Spartan or all those races. And you have to look. Now, you can avoid them. You can go off to the side and just say, hey, you know what? I'm going to skip this one. And then usually they give you like, okay, if you're going to skip this obstacle, you're going to skip this rope climb, you got to go do 100 push-ups or whatever it is. And that's fine. You're still getting a benefit. The fact that you signed up for the race is actually good, because you know that you're setting up an obstacle for yourself. You're setting up a challenge for yourself, which goes to show you that you have a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. Because people who have a fixed mindset typically don't go out searching for the challenge. They don't go out searching for the obstacles, right? So the third thing is effort. So some things take a little bit of time, and some things take a little bit of effort. So when there's some effort that needs to be done, do you embrace that effort, or do you run from it? Do you feel like, oh, it's not worth it, I'm just going to take the easy way out and I'm just going to chill and relax? Or when the effort comes, do you sort of stand up, tighten up your shoelaces and move into the effort? That's the idea from a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. So if you are the kind of person who just likes your little box and you like your little life inside that little box, I would imagine if you're watching this, you're probably not that kind of person. So that means you're more on the growth mindset spectrum. And if that's you, you actually search for these challenges and these obstacles, and you're willing to put in the effort because you know there's a reward that comes from the effort. So in talking about all this, I think it's just important to note that essentially if you can understand that process, you're walking down the road, there's a challenge, right? And there's an obstacle that's presented in front of you, and you know, excuse me, immediately that you're going to have to put in some effort and some work to get over that. Are you the kind of person who says, no, I want to walk to the side? Or are you the kind of person who says, okay, I'm going to suck it up and I'm going to put the effort in, I'm going to conquer this obstacle and conquer the challenge? But why, I think, is an important note just right here, is I think it's important, at least for me, to understand that whenever I do something that's challenging, there's always a reward. And I don't always know what the reward is, but I know that there's a reward. So for instance, I know that the reward from a yoga practice. I typically challenge myself when I practice yoga, whether it's a vinyasa flow class and I'm sweating and I'm working hard and I'm doing arm balances and all that kind of stuff, or whether it's a yin yoga class where I'm holding hip stretches for a long time and I'm challenging myself that way. I know there's a reward after that. Simple thing, right? You exercise, you get this reward. You feel good, your body gets stronger. Yes, you're secreting serotonin and you actually feel happier, and there's all kinds of science behind the result of exercise. So if you take that as a microcosm and you bring it to the rest of your life and the macrocosm, so think about other areas. My point is, think about other areas in your life where you avoid things, because there are certain areas, like you can see my desk is, stacked full of papers because I don't like to do paperwork. It's too much effort for me. I prefer not to do it. I prefer to either have somebody else do it, or I just don't want to, there's too many other things that I want to do. I don't want to sit down there and go through all my paperwork, right? but I know that I have to. It's a challenge for me. It's an obstacle I have to get through because I know there's a reward. So that's me essentially calling myself out, saying I have to go sit down tomorrow and go through a whole bunch of unopened envelopes so that I can reap the reward of actually sitting at my desk and going, wow, this is great. It's nice and clean and organized, and, and then I can move on with that. So if you take the principle of understanding that there's going to be a challenge, and you're the kind of person that has a growth mindset, and you move toward the challenge, and you understand it's going to take effort to get through it, understand that there's going to be a reward. So what this will do, in my opinion, is this will allow you to reach your goals way sooner and way more frequently, because instead of coming up to an obstacle and then moving the other direction, you train yourself in a way to go for the reward, even though even though you know you have to get through certain obstacles and you have to do certain things for that. So that's my 2 cents on that whole process. So the fourth one, sorry, I got a little something in my throat here. The fourth one is criticism, which is kind of a big deal, this one here, because, and my wife will tell you, I'm not always the best at taking criticism. I mean, for the most part I am. Like if it comes from someone I don't know, I can sort of take it or whatever, but you know, spouses know how to push your buttons, and I get a little defensive sometimes. My wife will say something to me and I'll go, well, that's not the case, you know. And she'll go, well, no, honey, it is the case. She doesn't really call me honey, but she'll say, no, it kind of is the case. I think you should take a look at that. And sometimes I have this immediate, like, defensive action, like, no, that's not them. And that's something for me to look at. So again, calling myself out here, something for me to actually look at and say, wait a second. So what I wrote down here with this topic is response versus reaction. So the response for something like this, let's say my wife talks to me and says, you know what, you said something the other day and I didn't really love how you said it. So I would prefer that, I'd say, what do you mean? I didn't, all of a sudden I get defensive and I react. And that's a negative experience for her. And I don't like it ultimately, right? I mean, I don't like the fact that I'm getting negative or getting reactive. So this is, I think, out of these 5 things, this is the thing that I have to work on a little bit more. And again, sometimes I'm okay with people, saying, oh, is it okay if we do this or we do that? Usually I'm pretty pliable, but there are times where I just get defensive and I react. So that's something for me that I have to look at. Because on the growth mindset side of the spectrum, whether you're fixed mindset or growth mindset is okay with criticism, saying, oh yeah, okay, oh, let me look at that. That's interesting. Let me see how that works. Now, funny enough, when I go do something, let's say I come up with an idea for a project and I'm not really sure how it's going to work out. So what I'll do is I'll ask the opinion of some people, and I'll take some information from one person, I'll take some information from another person, and then I'll weigh everybody's information. So in a way, that's kind of collecting this advice, really. It's not quite criticism, but it's collecting different pieces of information, and then I'll move forward based on what I feel like is the best thing to move forward with. So I'm working on that. And then the final one here is success of others. So when someone is successful, that's near you or that's around you, what is your response to that? So I live here in Malibu, and there's plenty of people who are very successful on the outside, because you can see they're driving certain cars, they live in big homes, and that's outside stuff, right? They wear all kinds of luxury stuff, and that's outside. I'm not really as concerned with, I don't believe that that's necessarily a direct link to whether or not someone is successful, because you can have all the greatest things on the outside and really not feel great on the inside. And that's a very, very, very clear thing. So for me, when I see someone who looks successful on the outside, I say, okay, well, great, that's good for them. I'm very happy for them. Right? For me, I know that my whole not my whole life, but a lot of my life has really been about making myself successful on the inside. And I would consider myself successful both inside and outside, but I mostly work on the inside because for me, sometimes you're going to have things and sometimes things are going to go away. Sometimes you're going to make more, sometimes you're going to make less. And that's not really there's plenty of studies that say once you hit $75,000 a year, there is no incremental happiness based on how much money you make. So we already know that just because someone has things doesn't make them happy, right? And we've heard that a million times before. So for me, when I look at other people who are successful, what I look at is how are they on the inside? Are they happy with themselves? Do they have this state of contentment? Do they have this state of internal peace and calmness and relaxation? Like that's ultimately someone who's okay and can handle life's unexpected, right? Which is one of the reasons why we meditate. It's one of the reasons why we practice yoga, because we're ultimately looking, I think, for me anyway, looking to keep that sense of calmness, looking to keep that sense of peace and relaxation, because inevitably life is going to throw you the unexpected. And how do you deal with that is the question. How do you actually deal with those tough times when they come at you? How do you deal with the challenge? How do you deal with the obstacle? Are you willing to put the effort in, right? So it all links back together. And I firmly believe that when people are successful inside and outside, or inside or outside, whatever you see as someone who's successful, I firmly believe that that only creates more room at the top, so to speak, right? So when someone makes it to the top of the mountain, they've made it up there. And now they can help somebody else make it up there. Now, of course, yes, there's plenty of greedy people who don't want to help anybody. But hopefully, if you're watching this, you're not the kind of person who's just going to kick people down. You're the kind of person who's going to lift people up. Those are the kind of people I want to surround myself with. People who are willing to put the time and the effort and bust through obstacles, and who are okay with criticism. Teach me a little about that. And who are, when you look at other people's success, say, oh wow, that's great. What can I learn from that person? Maybe they can help me. Maybe there's a way that we can help share information. I love this new sharing economy that's happening now, because for me, it's great because now we get to share resources, right? It's not, this is mine, I'm going to take it and you can't have it. And that's how wars start, and that's how, anger starts. That's how sibling rivalry starts. This is the way I want things, and I'm not willing to see it your way. And then there's this split. And I think if we can lead from our hearts and lead with a sense of compassion and peace and forgiveness, I think that the world will be a much better place. That's for sure. So just to recap, I'm going to give you guys a few little tips and tricks on what you can do to shift from a fixed mindset, if you have it, over to a growth mindset, which is going to help you in your own life and hopefully in the lives with those around you. So the first thing is the challenges. So if you're the fixed person and you avoid challenges, what I want you to do is the next time you come up to a challenge, I want you to stop for a moment. Just stop, take a breath, and go, wait a second. Okay, here's this one of these moments that I would typically avoid. And I typically get frustrated and I typically walk away from this challenge. I want you to just stop, notice, then you can take the step to go toward it. But until you stop and notice that you're avoiding these things, you're never going to understand how to change. So the first thing you have to do is, when there's the next challenge that comes up for you in your life, stop and go, hey, wait a second, this is one of those challenges that Ted was talking about. So I'm going to notice now, and now I'm going to stop, and then I'm going to start to move forward and embrace the challenge. Second one is the obstacles, which is obviously very similar, but you want to persist. So whatever the challenge is, first you stop and notice, then commit to actually moving through. Commit to moving forward through that particular challenge. That's your second step. Third one is effort. So the third thing is that movement through the challenge takes the effort. So you commit to doing it, then you actually have to do it. Okay, so there's a follow through with this here. So you're aware of it, and then you commit to actually doing it, and then you do it. Okay, and you follow through with it. And then the fourth one is the criticism. So the criticism is ask for it. Ask for it from someone. I'm going to do this. So ask for it from someone who you love, who you know loves you. This is always my wife's comment. She goes, "Don't you know I'm on your side?" She's like, "Don't you know that I only want what's best for you?" Because I'm like, rah, rah, rah. And then she's like, well, "Don't you understand that I'm only doing this because I love you and because I want you to succeed and I want you to be better?" And so that's important for me to understand. So you go to a person like that and say, "Hey, I'm looking for some constructive criticism, and I'm looking for a little bit of help of how you think I can do whatever it is a little bit better." And I guarantee you that will open up a whole discussion, and hopefully it will be better for you in the long run. And so that's the fourth thing. And the final thing is, the next time you notice yourself get envious or jealous of someone who might look like they're more successful, inside or outside, doesn't matter. Whatever, if you feel like, you get this kind of, that jealousy or that envy, just pause again for a second. Here, you don't have to do anything except pause and relax and understand and let that feeling go. Here's one of the great things about emotions: they pass. Great things about thoughts, so we learn this in meditation, is that when you sit and you relax and you're calm, then it will pass. The thought will pass, the feeling will pass, the emotion will pass. So when you get that envy and that jealousy because someone else has something that you want, just relax for a moment, take a couple breaths, and then breathe, let it go, and then you can move on. And hopefully that will help get you from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset. And that is it for me today. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you guys next week.